What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your man, Tytan Inc., and I'm here with Charles Reed. He is a blockchain consultant, and we're bringing you the next episode of the Modern Markets podcast. So if you would, Charles, just explain a little bit about what you do. His article today is actually on stablecoins, so that's what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. I've been in the space since 2016. Obviously, first came in through an interest in altcoins and Bitcoin, and largely was attracted by price action. As time progressed, I really did have a very keen interest in cryptocurrency as money. Began working with blockchain startups. So, initially was a journalist writing about these projects, and then actually moved to work with the projects themselves. Learned as much as I could about token economics and how to actually build distributed systems and economies that will exist on the chain. So how do you actually make a business profitable out of a blockchain company? And now more recently, I've been, almost exclusively working with crypto wallets and trying to basically make crypto easier to spend, send, receive, and store. So that's what I'm working at the moment. I'm head of Zumo Kit, which is Zumo's SDK for building crypto wallets, basically white label, plug and play crypto wallets. And we are a crypto wallet for sending and spending Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stablecoins. So that's really exciting for me because at the moment it's quite difficult to do that.
So basically what we're going to talk about today is stablecoins. Central bank digital currency, stablecoins, they're all similar, but Charles has a unique perspective on these stablecoins. What are stablecoins, first of all, and what purpose do they serve?
Sure. So Bitcoin obviously presented a new way to look at money. It's borderless, unlike traditional banking infrastructure. Banking infrastructure, for example, in the US is very archaic. Banks struggle even to send money between themselves. They all have different routing numbers and such. But what stablecoins give us is the borderless infrastructure and the ability to program money to make things automated. So it allows code to control cash for the first time, which is really interesting for things like insurance and executing things if this then that. It's pretty simple, but the stable coins offer us to be able to do that, but without the volatility, which is obviously really important because people want these benefits of programmable money without the volatility in a lot of cases.
Right. So it's like people want the ability to still be able to use their currency at a relatively stable price or value without the inconveniences that banks offer today, which is kind of why Bitcoin has become so popular, because of the new way, a new form of money that's come out of it. It's peer-to-peer. You don't have to have a third party in between. You can send it across the world for I saw one transaction one time with Bitcoin, and I think it was like 43 cents for a $750,000 transaction, something wild. Yeah. So these are reasons why people would want to, start looking at alternatives. But the next thing is a more interesting type of stable coin like MakerDAO. And I'm not even going to begin to explain how MakerDAO works, but it's an algorithmic backed stablecoin. Could you explain why we would even need something like that?
Yeah, sure. So this is really interesting because there's obviously different types of stablecoins. There's ones which are backed by assets on chain, like they're backed by baskets of crypto assets, like MakerDAO, which is collateralized by Ethereum and other crypto assets, for other stablecoins. And then you have stablecoins which are backed by assets off chain, like the dollar or the pound. You can even back them by multiple assets off chain. So you could have a stablecoin which is backed by a basket of 10 different fiat currencies. So it would be even more stable than the dollar or the pound or the Swiss franc. But the most interesting of all of them is the algorithmic backed, like Basis or MakerDAO. Now, Basis is a really good example because this achieves price equilibrium by basically, based on the demand, it will adjust the supply. Now, you can't really, do that effectively with fiat money. So algorithmic, they're the hardest to get right because there's always this there's more volatility in the price. But if you did get it right, then you would basically just have sound money. You would be able to stabilize the price based on supply and demand. So they're really interesting. Basis obviously raised 130 million, and then they basically just got hit with a hammer by the US, the regulators, and they just decided we can't do this. This is, if we are to do this, it's going to be in a way where it won't be our true vision. So they just cancelled things. So the algorithmic ones are really tricky. The first one was in 2014, I think it was called Nubits, which is pretty successful, but that's quite a complex way of kind of adjusting money. So at the moment, the more favored ones are the fiat backed.
Do you think it would even be possible to get big enough as a stable coin to where it might be kind of countering, obviously, like fiat money, obviously, where regulators are like, nope, sorry, this is working too well, I guess is the word. I can't see, something working, like, unless it's Bitcoin, obviously, because Bitcoin is, you can't really regulate Bitcoin unless you got rid of all the miners.
Yeah, and I think, with like fiat backed stable coins, it would be easier to do that because, like Trust token is my favorite stable coin because Trust actually is a regulated issuer. They have, a bank with dollars in, they have a bank with pounds in. For every asset on chain, there's an asset in a bank, which is, that's fantastic. But if that got too big, it would be difficult to.
If it starts rivaling, the US dollar or the British pound.
Exactly. And what you'd probably see is, the CBDCs they wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
Because that's what they want to essentially do. They want to issue stable dollars. So right. I think that's going to be where the competition comes in. I think the one public assets like Tether, for example, I mean, really, you can move them around quite freely. And one of the things that I've explored a bit and that I'm finding is an emergence of kind of people hedging their assets into, other currencies. And what you might see is people finding ways to spend a stable coin amongst a small community. So rather than, buying with a dollar, they might decide that they want to receive a euro or a Swiss franc, or even this new type of stable coin, which is backed by other things. So I think that if it's built in the right way and it's organic, it would be very hard to actually stop like Bitcoin. But, I think we'll have to kind of just keep our finger on the pulse and just see what happens over time with that.
Right. And in this article, you actually called them like microeconomies where they start using a currency that's not of their own, like dictated currency. I think it was like Chile and Argentina.
Yeah. So what we're seeing as well is, in a lot of countries, you get like dollarization where these countries move towards the US dollar because their own currency kind of fails or it collapses. I mean, it's happened a bunch of times. It's happening in Venezuela. Obviously, everyone knows that. I don't want to drone on about Venezuela. But dollarization is a really common thing. It's happened, all over the world, in Zimbabwe, for example. But what you can have with stable coins is dollarization, but with crypto assets. And all you need to have a bank account is a mobile phone with a blockchain wallet. And then suddenly you have, access to all of these different coins. Difficulty obviously is to spend them, but it's still very interesting because, like we were saying before, if you find these small economies of people who actually decide that they want to take payment in this stable coin, then you can exchange for goods then. So it really just depends on people creating them systems themselves, which I think they will.
It's funny because like all around the world, you'll have like little pockets, or areas like I was in Cambodia, and in Cambodia, of course, they use the US dollar. They'll give you back Cambodian rial. They don't want that. They'd rather have the dollar.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So it's so funny how like they'll never have a problem with that. But if you start using like having little microeconomies with stable coins, nope, can't be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I think like it would largely be ignored. Like they wouldn't care much, like at first. Yeah. But if it starts to make a really big impact, then on the banks, then they would care. But I think actually, like the beauty of this stuff is it will first benefit people who need it the most. And then on from there, when we start doing that stuff, when people start building interfaces for having, a Forex market on your mobile, which uses just stable coins, that's when the regulators get really nervous because then that money exists outside of the banking system. So it might exist in a bank somewhere, but it's like, between the bank and the users. So it creates, it paves the way for some really, really interesting user interfaces and software that could be built. And that's when they start to probably get a bit mad and suspect.
Yeah. So it's almost like, in the initial stages of this like dollarization, like you were saying, it's okay because it's actually benefiting the communities. They're fine. It's not, too big of a deal. But then once it starts becoming more common, it starts kind of reaching out from the regionalization or the regional area that it's in. That's when there starts to, become problems. So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think the timeline is for a central bank digital currency to actually come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because obviously China is ahead on that. China are gonna, they're gonna be the first, and I mean, in the last couple of weeks, the US actually talked about a digital dollar as a relief effort as part of the coronavirus bill, which they quickly scrapped. They actually removed that from the bill.
They put it in two bills, and they moved it from both.
Yeah, so I mean, it shows that they're talking about it, and also the Central Bank of England is, also aggressively, pursuing the idea of a digital currency issued by the bank. They've actually got public paper which you can respond to as a citizen, as a corporation, as a bank, as private banks or whatever, and you can give feedback and talk about this, and it's an open subject to them, which I find is really interesting, and they really do have a good grasp. So I read through that, and I found that really interesting because they do have a good idea of what they're doing. So yeah, I think timeline, I think we are looking at probably in the next 5 years. I mean, China will probably have that as quick as the next 2 years, because they have what is kind of like a surveillance state. Well, it's definitely a surveillance state. They have so much control and influence that they can roll this thing out so rapidly, whereas it would take much longer to roll out in the US or the UK or Europe. So I think China in the next 2 years, as early as the next 2 years, and I think we're probably looking at the US speeding things up once they see China have done that, depending on the response as well, because it's just programmable money, so it depends how you're going to program it. I mean, China are probably going to have very strict and stringent rules, where the UK or the US, we could actually be a little bit more relaxed on that, and it could really benefit people in an interesting way. So I think 2 to 5 years we'll start to see the superpowers of the world will do that. And also Russia, they even did the crypto ruble. The crypto ruble was like 2 years ago. They were really on the front foot. I don't know much about that, so I'm speculating a bit, but they did actually announce crypto ruble back in 2017. So
yeah, it's interesting. China is really already in the right ecosystem for a digital yuan, because they're already in contactless payments. I don't think anybody really uses cash. Like, very few people.
Most of the people who are still using cash in China are in the rural economies, like the farmers, and they're even making huge efforts to get them to use contactless payments as well now. So it's only so long, and like you said, they're in the perfect ecosystem to do that, which is why I think they could roll it out very quickly, because everyone already uses like Alipay and WeChat. So I think it's basically the same. Everyone gets it already. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that unravel.
The thing about the WHO, the World Health Organization, and of course a lot of media from China are all coming out against physical cash, because they claim that it can carry the coronavirus.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually wrote about that. That was something I wrote about last week. That's why what sparked the digital dollar thing, the discussion with the digital dollar in the US, because they were like, oh, it's moving viruses. And there is also conflicting evidence that says it's not, but it's a good narrative, right? It's the whole thing of like, never let a good crisis go to waste. If you can push the digital dollar, like they're going to do it now. So there is that too. And I think it's about seeing some of these things are narratives that are spun in a certain way, but as long as you're aware of that, it's still very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be the narrative, like, moving forward now. Even if it doesn't make its way in this pandemic, if there is one in the future, or even if like in between in between periods of time, I mean, I think we're definitely going to have like that narrative pop up again. Hey, physical cash is carrying the virus. We need to switch to something else. If governments aren't going to be using, in your article, you actually mentioned that they may not actually use DLT or blockchain technology. What characteristics, or what are they going to use for these central bank digital currencies?
It's a really good question, and to be honest, I don't have the answer. I wish they were a bit more clear, but I think what they're doing, to be honest, I read that and quoted it from the Bank of England's paper on digital currencies. And they said we might not use cryptocurrency, we might not consider cryptocurrency, and we might not use a blockchain and a DLT. Now, I suspect they're doing that so that they don't box themselves in. So they're saying we won't necessarily use any of this stuff, but what's the alternative? So I mean, it will probably distributed ledger. It would probably have to be.
I guess unless something else came up, but like right now there really are only two options.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just I think that's them trying not to box themselves in and trying to remain as on the fence as they can, so that any decisions they make, they've not kind of publicized. Because also you have to think, if you publish a public paper on a central bank currency, you have other states, other nations looking at that. and for information. So you have to be very careful about, what you're talking about, just politically and from that, perspective as well. But I do suspect that they will be using a DLT because they do talk consistently about decentralization and programmability. So,
and for everybody listening, DLT means distributed ledger technology. So it's similar to a blockchain, but from my understanding, just more permission, so more control to the distributor. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a blockchain is a type of distributed ledger, but when we started to see, things like Hashgraph or Radix, they aren't blockchains. So DLT kind of encompasses more types of distributed ledgers. So yeah, I think, as the terminology progresses and different types come out, maybe then they'll update the paper and stuff like that, and we'll start to see a little bit more information on that, which I really look forward to kind of following, because I didn't realize these papers were out here, but they're public. You can respond to them, and it's also a really good opportunity to kind of get involved in that if you are interested in the technology, because there is a huge demand for people who understand and want to get involved in that. So public responses to these central banks is a good way to kind of, and I know a lot of probably more crypto anarchists are listening, or people who don't want to go and work for a central bank, but it's worth being aware of for sure.
Yeah, and you were mentioning that it's actually kind of difficult for a lot of these central banks or even these nations to get the best minds for blockchain or DLT technology, because of the fact that it originates from like a crypto anarchist perspective. So like trying to get somebody who has the best knowledge of this is actually quite difficult for them.
Yeah, and not just that, but you have to pay big bucks if you want the best talent. And traditionally, Silicon Valley corporates will mop up the best talent in the world rather than, the government and the public sector, because the public sector jobs don't pay as highly. Even the technologists now, when it's something like this, they probably do, especially central banking. So, I try to, not be too black and white there, and be a little bit flexible, because there are some incredibly good technologists who are going to no doubt be working on this stuff, especially in China, but and I think even in England as well. But it's just worth noting that there are probably crypto anarchists who want to work on Libra, on Facebook's cryptocurrency, and who want to work for Facebook for the right reasons. Or, I talk a little bit about Facebook has a terrible reputation, obviously, but there are definitely people on the Facebook team and the Libra team who want to do the right thing. It's just foolish to think that there's not, just because you work for Facebook doesn't make you a horrible person. So it's definitely worth considering that. But I do think, the public sector do struggle to, firstly, hire the right talent because they can't pay as much, and then secondly, attract it, because some of the top cryptographers in the world, they probably don't want to build a central bank digital currency. They have a different vision of it.
Yeah, they don't want to have their name tied to that. Now that brings up like kind of an interesting question. Do you think when Facebook Libra came out, it was a huge thing? Governments across the world were like, no, stop right there. We're not going to let you do this. And they actually had to kind of go through the ringer with regulations in the US. And I kind of have the feeling that it may appear in the future, but obviously very different. And I have a feeling that there might also be some ties to the US government via the currency. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really difficult, because they are, of all the stablecoin types that I kind of looked at, like public chain stablecoins, asset backed, and then you have CBDCs, and then you finally have like corporate issued stablecoins, or you have corporate issued cryptocurrencies. Of all of them, that is the hardest to pull off, because the government is already scared about how much influence and power Facebook have. They don't want to now give them the opportunity to, Facebook connects like over 2.5 billion people, which is insane. If you now give them all 2.5 billion people new banking infrastructure that coexist, that they can all use, seamlessly, that is extremely threatening to any centralized authority. So out of all of these types, the corporate stablecoin is the hardest to succeed because of that reason. So will Libra be successful? Will it launch? I don't know. I hope to see it, launch, but will it be the original vision? Absolutely not. It's going to be very difficult to make it that way. They're going to have to get like rubber stamped by the US basically now, or they're going to have to build something so decentralized that no one can stop it, which I just don't see is even possible when you're a corporate like Facebook. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't. But I think the more collaboration that they have with the regulators and with the central banks, perhaps there's something they can do there. Even if they offer to kind of build some solutions for the central banks, that might be, a way around it. But I mean, it's my guess is as good as anyone's around that. I'm not sure, but I am excited to kind of see what they can pull off, because they have a lot of money and a lot of smart people, so they will pull something off, and it will be impressive.
I agree. So I had a question. There are some theories rolling around that, a lot of these fiat currencies that exist across the world. I mean, like almost every nation has their own fiat currency, with the aside from the fact that people sometimes use a dollar occasionally. But what's happening is our world is becoming much more global. So the theory is that eventually what will happen is a lot of these fiat currencies will kind of be disseminated into like one or a couple of different major currencies. Like, okay, let's say most of Asia might end up using the yuan. Most of North America might end up using the US dollar, for instance. I feel like this would probably be more likely just with the whole, digitization of the currencies moving forward. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then, there's the whole conspiracy side of the one world currency and stuff like that, which is, it's interesting. I think that's going to happen because, the world is not one superpower, and there's a lot of seats at the table. So I do think we are moving towards, consolidation of currencies, of fiat currencies for sure. I don't know although you have to look at, for example, like the UK, we just left Europe and we weren't even using the euro before. So, not only were we already in Europe, but we didn't use the euro. So I think there are still them big head seat tables that people are just going to, be very persistent. This is our currency. And it's really only when the currency doesn't work anymore that there's a reason for, that consolidation. So, but I do think that we are moving towards that. And North America is a really good example that they are slow. And more countries are seeing that dollarization happen. So, and with digitization as well, like you said, you just need a mobile phone and then suddenly you have access to a bank. So in underbanked countries, I do suspect that bank or that way of paying or way of storing and sending money will probably be done in the most imminent country. So for example, North America, they are going to use the dollar, of course, when they make payments from a mobile phone. So I do think that that's definitely not far off, that currency consolidation.
I don't know if you've ever done any traveling in Asia, but I actually stayed in the Philippines for like 4 to 5 months. And while I was there, I got to see an interesting kind of transition. So most of the people in the Philippines, they'll use cash because it's just the most available thing to use. I mean, sometimes people have, smartphones here and there, but it's much more common people have cash. They don't have bank accounts either. But what I did see was becoming more common was, so there's two kinds of G credits. There's Gcash, and then there's which I think is actually Globe, their mobile network, and then I think Grab has their own credits. So Gcash is like a popular thing in the Philippines. It's like a digital cash. They can have it on their Globe app. So they're already using like alternative methods to access the internet without bank accounts, so to speak. Yeah, because what they can do is they can actually load their Gcash cards from 7-Elevens.
Yeah, it's really trending there at the moment. And coins.ph is another example, right? So coins.ph was recently acquired by, I think it was, I'm not going to guess, but it was, they had a very big acquisition. They sold for a lot of money. And how coins.ph works is it's prepaid cards, but they're partnered with nearly every utility company in the Philippines. They're partnered with 7-Eleven. So what you do is you load up a prepaid card, and the settlement's actually done with Ripple, which is really interesting.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But it's done extremely quickly, so you don't really know you're interacting with Ripple. And it's done in a way where, you don't load the card with Ripple, you load it with eCash, but you use Ripple to make the payment. So it's, once it's on the card, it's just eCash and it's stable in value. But coins.ph were very, very successful over the past few years. There's hundreds of thousands of people using it, and they can effectively pay for anything with it. They can pay for their phone bill, they can pay for their gas or their water, they can pay for their Grab. And it's because coins.ph went for partnerships with the utility companies, with the phone companies. So that's made possible by cryptocurrency. And that's an example we looked at. I was at Techstars last year, Techstars Studio, and we had an idea for a crypto wallet, which would allow you to hold multiple stable coins on at once. So you could exchange, a dollar to a pound to a franc to a peso on a mobile phone, and they were all stable coins. And that was the idea where a lot of this research came from. And coins.ph currencies.ph we looked at, and it was just really, really interesting because I had no idea, firstly, that was cryptocurrency, and secondly, how many people were using it. And they've done a really good job and had a successful exit. So that just shows that stuff is happening in the Philippines, for example. Why can't it happen elsewhere?
It's very true. It's very true. I guess we'll just summarize, what crypto anarchists want out of this whole thing, what regulators/governments want, and then what corporations want. Each of these categories, to summarize all three of these down, what's a world that everybody could get along that would?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the world as it is right now is a big place, and there already are systems that benefit each type, right? So you've got Monero, and you have Bitcoin, and you have crypto assets, and they will still exist. People are still going to build them. They're still going to be used. Then, CBDCs, they are going to be a thing, and people will use them, and they will be very good. They'll be very helpful to have digital money, digital fiat money. And then, of course, the difficult people who aren't going to get along so well is the corporations and the central banks, because central banks do not want to lose their power, their seat at the table, to corporations like Facebook. They just don't. But realistically, the infrastructure is there with Facebook to connect 2.5 billion people with one single unified banking system. So that's really where the conflict's going to come from. So yeah, I think, to sum up what they want, obviously crypto anarchists kind of want, private, decentralized. They want to have sound money that they can use secretly and be free from suppression and surveillance. And of course, central banks want to continue to have their power, because obviously they're in charge and they have the most influence over us. So they want to keep their seat there, and they want to ensure that they still have that power. And the corporates, I think they just want to leverage their influence to make more money, of course, but also to gain that more control from the central banks. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think, like I said, and we talked about a little bit earlier, these people can coexist and they do work together. You do have crypto anarchists who work at Libra. I know that for a fact. They might not be very public about it at work, but they do want to influence them building good software that is fair. The same way the central banks have people plant themselves there so that they can influence people in the right way. Because if we do work together, we can create systems which do benefit everyone. I think where you have to worry about more is in surveillance states, is in places like China or North Korea, where you have absolutely no security or privacy with your money, and that's really where you have to worry. I think we're less at threat of that, but absolutely something that we should always pay attention to.
Right. And this is kind of just like a side question, not related to stablecoins necessarily, but for instance, in China, a large portion of the Bitcoin mining is located here. Do you think, this has obviously been like a rumor throughout the years that China will ban Bitcoin mining. Do you think that this is ever going to happen to, I guess, persuade the usage of the digital yuan? Like, I don't know. Do you think that's ever going to happen in the future?
Maybe. If China did ban Bitcoin mining, it would be really bad for everyone. But then you just have to think, people would pick up the pieces elsewhere. And I think China don't want to lose that influence, because what's more powerful for China is seizing the Bitcoin mining operations rather than banning them.
Very true.
So they have that. They know it's there, it's in their front garden, right? Because if they want to, they can suddenly control, the majority of hash. So yeah, so I think that's, more of a concern, is that China will seize the Bitcoin hash power rather than ban it.
Right. Who's to say they haven't already?
Yeah, exactly right. I'm almost certain that they definitely have large stockpiles of, crypto assets. The central bank control. I'll be surprised if most, major global superpowers don't, because it makes sense to, right? Because it's a case of like, I don't know if China are doing it, but if they are, I want to be doing it too. Or, I don't know if Russia have a bunch of Bitcoin, but if they do, I need some too. So I think that's something that, is also going on as well.
And that's so interesting to me because, even if you wanted to buy up the entire supply, you can't. You got to wait.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And then that's really the hodl stuff, right? Is when people, they're holding it because they do not want someone else to have it. That's when it becomes really compelling, because, when a state or a nation is holding, an asset because they don't want someone else to have it, then that's when the real scarcity kind of kicks in as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept there. So I guess we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time though. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think, really crazy stuff's getting built right now. Everyone's stuck at home. Some of the coolest discoveries or inventions of our time in human history came from during like the Black Plague and stuff. So people are at home, they're learning, they're coding, they're writing software, they are still building. So we're going to see some really interesting stuff. I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a lot more. I want to see a lot more crypto wallets. That's why I'm working on a really cool crypto wallet, because I want more ways to send, spend, and store cryptocurrency and crypto assets, especially stable ones. I'm a huge fan of that, spending these currencies, and also just helping underbanked people, because it's something that we hear so often in crypto, in blockchain world. Bank the underbanked, but it's really difficult, and people are actually getting there now. They are actually helping, and there's coins.ph, for example, because it gives everyone the ability to basically turn their mobile phone into a bank, and I think we're going to see more of that. So that's what I'm definitely excited for.
I agree. Well, Charles, I appreciate you coming on with this interview with us.
Yeah, really good talk. Yeah.
Let us know where can they find you on social media, and what are some projects that you're working on right now that maybe they can give more support with.
Yeah, awesome. So you can find me on Twitter mostly. My @ is Chat with Charles. I am starting a podcast soon as well. It's not going to be blockchain related. It's just going to be me talking to really smart, interesting folks. So I'd love to have you on there as well.
Yeah, man.
As for some projects I'm working on, I support a few mobile app companies who are building really cool software or web apps, mobile apps. So you can find them on LinkedIn as well. It's Charles J. Reed on LinkedIn, and you can see some of the portfolio of stuff I'm working on. And then of course Zumo, which is the crypto wallet that we're building. We're moving to mainnet this week, so you will be able to use real ETH and Bitcoin, and then we'll add stable coins very soon. We are regulated. You will have to KYC. Sorry for any crypto anarchists who are listening.
Yeah.
But it is a really good way if you are heavily into the blockchain space, if you do have a lot of crypto assets, if you do want a way to spend your stable coins, to also instantly swap them to Bitcoin or Ethereum. And we're also looking at rolling out some interesting features around that as well. So that's Zumo Pay, Zumo.money, Zumo.money. You can find us there.
Awesome, man. Again, thank you very much. This has been awesome. I mean, this is a lot of information for everybody. So really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll chat again next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.